Views and opinions expressed by the participants in this program are those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent the views of Gray Media Inc., KTVF, my mother, or the Commissioner of Baseball.
This is a Did you notice a little something on that screen as it came up there as we began today's edition of Interior Insight, show number 18? That's right. We are now brought to you by the Gas and Diesel Doctor, which we really appreciate because we were able to have a meeting with them. They told us they believe in the potential for this program. They like that it's locally focused, that we pay attention to things that have to do with Fairbanks, and so it's an honor to have them on board with us. Thank you very much, Gas and Diesel Doctor, for being the sponsors of show number 18 here today of Interior Insights. Now, I'd be fibbing if I didn't say I feel a little bad that this happens to be the show that they came on board with us, because I don't know how to use my toys so very well all the time, because I graduated from the same school of genius as Wile E. Coyote, which hopefully you've heard of, and if not, then it's just a vague reference. So what happened is we wanted, because of the winter weather that we've been having, and things being obviously a little different than normal, we wanted to get the guys in to talk about avalanche safety, because a lot of times people will think, well, here in the interior, avalanche, is it really all that big a deal? And actually, it turns out that it is, and we're gonna find out why, but not as I planned, because I had a real good conversation with Hank Statowich and Andy Doughty, and problem is that there was an audio issue with the first half of it. So what I'll have to do is kind of recap for you what we talked about leading up to the conversation, and then the part of the interview that recorded properly, we will bring you that. So it's still going to be a lot of good information, just sort of not the way that we wanted it to. It's show number 18, of course, and the web address, webcenterfairbanks.com. The app is Alaska's news source, Fairbanks. Email jrlewis@ktvf11.com if you want to get in touch with me. And again, a big thank you to our sponsor now, the Gas and Diesel Doctor. Next week, by the way, I'm hoping that we'll be able to play part 2 of our Jeff Cook show, which is not about the trying to get the PET scanner, which was successful, by the way, that whole fundraising effort, but just to be able to talk with somebody who's been here for over 80 years and get some perspective on sort of the history of Fairbanks and how it's changed and where he thinks it's headed and that kind of thing. So we're looking forward to bringing you that next week. And this weekend, there's a little something. That's right, KTVF is excited to announce the 2026 Interior Wedding Showcase to be held this Sunday, March 8th, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Westmark Gold Room in Fairbanks. And we invite you to join us at the largest bridal expo in interior Alaska, where brides-to-be can plan and shop for their wedding in one place, and grooms-to-be can stand there bewildered. It features a variety of the finest bridal products. Hey, I was a groom, I can say that. Finest bridal products and services throughout the state. You'll find jewelers, caterers, florists, photographers, DJs, and everything you need to make your wedding dreams come true. It's a free event, and it's open to the public. If you would like more information, you contact Marlene Phillips at marlene.phillips@ktvf11.com. By golly, I got that right this week. Now, we, for a couple of reasons, we're going to forego the news portion this week, because we've got one of our calendar items is a little on the long side, and I want to make sure we have enough time for that. And then also, this show is going to sort of not be normal in terms of its format. But let's take a look at this here. This event is called Gabby's Voice, Breaking the Silence on Domestic Violence, and it's coming up tonight here. What happened is, what's happening is Nicole Schmidt and Tara Petito, the mother and stepmother of Gabby Petito, share their story and speak about recognizing the warning signs of domestic violence. After Gabby's death in a nationally known case of intimate partner violence, they turned unimaginable loss into advocacy, working to educate young people and families about red flags, prevention, and speaking up before abuse escalates. This event is open to UAF students, high school students, parents, and community members, and together they're hoping to raise awareness, support one another, and help break the silence surrounding domestic violence. The program is Gabby's Voice, Breaking the Silence on Domestic Violence. It's tonight, 6 to 8 p.m. at Scheibel Auditorium up there on campus. And if you can't make it, you can also Zoom in. If you aren't able to catch the Zoom address on the screen, just go to our website. Go to webcenterfairbanks.com, look in the calendar section, and you'll see this poster that we've been sharing. And the event is hosted by the UAF Department of Justice in partnership with the Gabby Petito Foundation. And speaking of that foundation, we'll kind of give you a scroll through their website here. The Gabby Petito Foundation was created in honor of Gabby Petito to prevent domestic violence and support efforts to locate missing persons. Through education, advocacy, and partnerships, the foundation works to raise awareness about intimate partner violence, empower young people to recognize warning signs, and provide resources that help protect vulnerable individuals and families. Now, the UAF Department of Justice is also involved. We'll scroll through their site a little bit here. And that department prepares students for careers in criminal justice, law, public service, and advocacy. Through research, community partnerships, and experiential learning, the department explores the issues of justice, victimization, public safety, and social responsibility, equipping students to make meaningful, ethical contributions in their communities. So again, you can visit webcenterfairbanks.com to see all the details on this, the Zoom link, any QR codes, website information, that sort of thing. Now, a bit on the lighter side, on page 2, we have Fairy Tale Theater Camp coming up, because spring break is not that far off. So on Monday, March 9th through Friday the 13th, what could go wrong there, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., up at the University of Alaska Fairbanks in Art 317, Fairy Tale Theater Camp. Here's what they say. Once upon a time, a group of young performers brought their favorite fairy tales to life. In this week-long camp, students will play theater games, design simple props and sets, and learn to work together as they discover the magic of storytelling. By the end of the week, campers will take the stage to share their creativity and new skills in a special performance for family and friends. It's for ages 7 to 12. It's 350 doubloons for the class. And for more information, there is a QR code on our website and on their poster. Or you can contact Summer at alaska.edu. And if you have any trouble capturing any of that information, again, all of this can be found in the calendar section of webcenterfairbanks.com. Okay, so now we get into the show, which is going to be a little unusual today because I have to kind of encapsulate the first part of it myself, and then we'll sort of join the interview in progress. And again, what happened was there was an audio problem during, we had to put this one together kind of quickly. We didn't have a whole lot of time to set up and redo and that sort of thing, because we want to get this out. We wanted to get this out today because, again, you get this information out sooner, you potentially save lives. So I figure it's worth it to have a technical issue to maintain the schedule. So Hank Statowich is with the Alaska Avalanche Information Center and Andy Dowdy with the Eastern Alaska Range Avalanche Center. What I'll do, and we'll do this on screen, and then also I'll read it for the folks that are doing audio, is we'll cover the first several questions that I talked about with them and then join in to the interview where the audio kicked back in and started working. So the first question we put out is, what is the Alaska Avalanche Information Center and why does Alaska need a statewide avalanche organization? And Again, a sort of more formal summary of what we talked about more lightheartedly is basically the Alaska Avalanche Information Center, or AAIC, is a nonprofit organization that supports avalanche forecasting, education, and public safety across the state. Alaska is enormous, and avalanche conditions vary widely from one region to another. But the risk is real almost everywhere people recreate in the winter. And as we'll see, that includes the interior in ways you might not expect. A statewide organization helps coordinate resources, support local avalanche centers, and make sure that Alaskans, whether they're skiers or snow machiners or just traveling through mountain terrain, have access to reliable science-based information to make safer decisions. Next thing we talked about was how the AAIC got started and how it's being community supported. The fact that it's community supported shapes what they do nowadays. And this was an interesting part of it when I was talking to Hank before we decided to do the show, because it's fun on Interior Insights to be able to talk to business owners, nonprofits who had, sort of a small idea and leaned into it, and it turned into a business or a significant organization, things that start at the grassroots level. So what he explained was that AAIC really grew out of grassroots efforts, local forecasters, guides, recreationists, and concerned community members who saw a need for better avalanche information in Alaska. He said that being community supported means we stay focused on what the people here actually need. The work is driven by local priorities, not profit, and that allows them to emphasize education, outreach, and long-term safety instead of just serving one particular user group. Now, this next one is where it got interesting. I asked why interior Alaska residents should care about avalanche risk closer to home. I mean, we don't have big giant mountains right next to the town like Valdez or even parts of Anchorage, so why is this a big deal here? And he said that when people think of avalanches, they often imagine far-off expeditions or extreme terrain, but for interior Alaska residents, avalanche risk is literally close to home. Communities like Delta Junction sit right in the middle of the Alaska Range, which is full of steep, complex terrain. That area has seen numerous avalanche fatalities over the years involving everyday Alaskans just doing normal winter activities. You don't have to be a professional skier or mountaineer to be exposed. Just traveling, recreating, or working in mountainous terrain can put you at risk. Understanding avalanche hazards here isn't abstract. It's directly tied to staying safe in the places that people live, work, and play. And in addition to that sort of more formal overview of the answer to the question, we also talked at this point about how an avalanche is not necessarily what we usually think of it, like something that comes down a big mountain and makes it into a Warren Miller film. An avalanche can be a bunch of snow sliding off your roof and landing on you when you're out using your snow thrower in the driveway. If you have one of those metal roofs that has the snow that slides off, you get buried under that, it's just as big a threat as being buried out in the backcountry somewhere. Playing in snow dumps. Sometimes people will like to dig tunnels through the snow dumps, and that, if that collapses, buried is buried. Some of the roads or the easements may have just enough of a slope that if there's enough snow piled up and the wind is loaded it just right, that it could cut loose. And again, so you don't have to be in an alpine area. There's all kinds of ways to be at risk getting buried by snow. And so they really wanted to communicate that this is not just about being out in the middle of the woods or on a mountain. Knowing about these snow conditions anywhere there's a lot of snow can be a lifesaver. We then moved on to why does the AAIC, the statewide organization, work through regional avalanche centers? And the answer to that, of course, is local knowledge is everything in Alaska. The snowpack in the eastern Alaska Range behaves very differently from coastal or Arctic regions. Regional centers are staffed by people who live and work in those areas, who understand local weather patterns, terrain, and use patterns. AAIC helps support those centers so that the information people rely on is specific, relevant, and grounded in what's actually happening on the ground. And we're going to hear more about that from Andy when we actually get to the part of the show where we're having the conversation. He'll talk about how he does that and how it helps. And then the last thing I asked Hank, I feel so bad about this because, the part that you'll see is mostly Andy because that's where the mics decided to kick back in. But Hank actually contributed a lot more to this conversation than you'll actually see. But I asked him, what would be one simple takeaway for someone who isn't a hardcore backcountry user? And what he said is that you don't need to be an expert to make safer choices. A great first step is simply knowing whether you're traveling in avalanche terrain and checking the forecast before you go. Even basic awareness like recognizing steep slopes or recent snowfall or strong winds can dramatically reduce risk. And then he talked about what they call the know before you go concept, which has some rules. You make sure you have the right gear, that you have the right training, that you've checked the forecast, that you looked around in the area you're going to recreate or work, get the picture. And then, if you think it's dangerous or something starts to happen, get out of harm's way. So after that part where we talked to Hank, we moved over to Andy. And the first thing that I asked him was what makes avalanche conditions in the eastern Alaska range, and that encapsulates us in the interior. What makes those conditions unique? And he said the eastern Alaska range often has a shallow, persistent snowpack with weak layers that can stick around for a long time. Cold temperatures and strong winds create conditions where avalanches can be triggered weeks after a storm, and that makes stability harder to assess and increases the importance of conservative terrain choices. And this would be a good point to emphasize that on their website, alaskasnow.org, they have information on when a slope starts to become more risky and the different levels of risk associated with different degrees of slope. So that's going to be a good website to keep in mind as we go through this, alaskasnow.org. All right, so after that question got answered, we actually had all of the audio that we needed and everything. So what we'll do is we'll jump in to where I had just asked Andy, what are the most common ways that people in interior Alaska get caught off guard by avalanche terrain or conditions? And he began that by talking about a certain kind of snow that can be down under the surface that you don't necessarily see.
Persistent weak layer that I was talking about, those gross sugar facets near the bottom, that's kind of tough to tell just looking at the conditions. That's deep underneath the snow. It's not active wind loading. It's not fresh snow falling from the sky. That's something that's kind of laying dormant. We call it like a sleeping dragon. It doesn't make you have a bad day until it makes you have a really bad day. And so it's tough if you're just going out, especially if you're just starting out recreating in the mountains, to be able to kind of track where that persistent weak layer might be and where that problem might be. And that's where Avalanche Professional comes in handy because they can track those weak layers, that good avalanche formulas that are set up to create an avalanche, and kind of inform the public of how reactive it's going to be, or maybe where on the mountain it's going to be. Hey, we've gotten a lot of wind from this direction, and like Hank said, wind moves snow way better than anything. So if we're getting all this wind from the south, then those north slopes are going to be loaded double, triple, maybe quadruple than the southern slopes. Mm-hmm. And so that's one thing I really like to focus on, is we all in this community want to get out in the mountains. And so trying to point people in the right direction where they can mitigate the risks. Going into avalanche terrain has inherent risks, but the big thing we try and do with training and education and forecasting is mitigating those risks and being able to have that fun while staying safe.
So say that you've checked on the conditions, you go out there, you're going to ski or snow machine or dog sled, whatever. Maybe it looks all right, but then, like you said, things can change. What are the red flags when you're trying to assess what you might be facing out there in the field.
Yeah, so the avalanche community has basically boiled it down to 5 big red flags, and I'll try and put them in order of most prevalent up here. The first one is recent avalanches. If you're looking around at slopes and you see a bunch of avalanches, guess what? There's probably going to be more avalanches. And if you're looking around and seeing all these natural avalanches, you adding a person or a snow machine is going to multiply that effect because you're adding that much weight. A natural avalanche, that one last little snowfall, that's what caused the avalanche.
Yeah.
You know, throw a 200-pound person like myself on there, we're adding a lot more weight to that snowpack. Number 2, we call it cracking or womping. So if you're skiing, and you might have seen this actually with the recent snow that we've had here, and you're taking a step and you get these like shooting cracks, kind of look like panes of glass if you shattered them, or big settlements that will happen and it'll make a whoomph sound. That's basically a flatland avalanche. Everything that needed to happen for an avalanche just happened, but you're not on a slope angle steep enough for the avalanche to occur.
Okay. But that tells you the snow is right for it,
Yeah,
and if
it's
you were...
right. And that
Okay.
one's a great one because I can tell and get those early warning signs before I get into avalanche terrain. The third one is high winds. And this basically means, hey, we could have a lot of snow. This loose snow that we have, nice dry snow, is moving around. And snowpacks don't like dramatic change. They're kind of like your grandpa. He doesn't like big changes. He doesn't like anything moving. You know, if we got to introduce something new to him, it needs to be nice and slow. So snowpacks like gradual change because we won't get into any of the nerd science stuff. But the slower, the better that things change. So recent winds can move a lot of snow very quickly.
You can see that often when you look on the ridge tops too. Like before you get into avalanche terrain, just by using your eyeballs, looking for the recent avalanches, or listening to whoomps and seeing big plumes of snow coming off the ridge tops. That's a dead giveaway.
Well, I saw that in my driveway.
Yeah,
you know,
sure,
after the last bit of snow that we had, and I thought, I've got 6-7 inches I'm going to have to blow out of there. And then the wind picked up and moved a whole bunch of it, and there was a crust on top. And so you imagine
that on a ridge top,
many times. Yeah, exactly.
The fourth one is recent loading. So 6 inches in about 24 hours is about kind of where that turns into a red flag. Like I said, snowpacks like gradual changes. So if you dump a bunch of snow all at once, it's going to take time to settle and to bond. And then the last one is a little bit less relevant for us up here until maybe the spring, but that's rapid warming. Once again, snowpacks don't like change, and if you make it really hot all of a sudden, that snow is going to start to melt, start adding weight in weird places, and it just kind of takes time for that to adjust. So not really a problem until maybe April or May.
Yeah.
Andy was saying, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but he was saying snow nerd stuff. That's the stuff that I love talking about. So
He blinded us with science.
Exactly, yeah. So we like to call it snow metamorphosis,
Yeah.
right? It changes over time. It's fascinating, but I'm not going to, I'm
Well,
going to
that's all
stop
right.
right there.
You're the chairman of the board, you know.
Yeah, people's eyes quickly glaze over once you start talking about, what's happened in the snow grains. They just want to know if they can go ski.
Yeah. So how do you collect your information then over the winter?
Yeah, so there's 3 main ways that I collect information about the deltas and the summit area. The first one is going out there in person. I go out, I check on conditions on the ground, I dig down in the snow pit, I see if we have that structure there, I explore different problems in different areas and different aspects, and so those are field days, which are really cool. You get a lot of information, but I can only go so far in a day, and I can only cover so much ground, and I can only get down there so many days a week. So when I'm not there, the next I use is weather stations. So that's another big focus, especially before we had an avalanche professional up here, is having those sensors in the mountains. Because what's happening, like at the Trims Creek, by that DOT station, might not necessarily be happening up higher in the mountains. The wind's going to be different, the snowfall is going to be different, the conditions are just going to be different. So putting in more and more sensors, and we call them snow tells, that are basically just weather stations specific towards reading snow data. Those are kind of my second pieces of information. Sometimes, that field information, I got to go and ground truth it, make sure the wind reader wasn't iced up in one direction and the wind was actually blowing all the way around because there's a big ice chunk on it. But those are super helpful. especially covering the gaps. You know, I was supposed to be in the field right now, actually, and then the temperatures dropped to very, very cold, very, very windy, and I'm just not going to be productive out there. I'm going to be focusing on keeping my fingers cold. I'm not going to have time to dig in the snow. And then the third one, which is almost the most important, is observations from the general public.
Okay.
Like I said, I can't be everywhere. And so when people submit observations onto our website, or even, you know, they might be trying to hide their powder stash that they found, they'll send me emails, shoot me text, or, you know, send me a DM or a private message on Facebook or Instagram, and just give me an update about the conditions. It's a real person on the ground truthing, you know, what's going on, and then I can kind of take those collective observations and then put it into a summary. All right, this is what I'm generally seeing in the range, and this is the avalanche problems that's probably going on. And so, you know, some people feel a little bit nervous submitting those observations because they think they need to be to a certain standard. They think they need to have all this gobbledygook and fancy lingo. Sometimes a picture is all I need. I can take quite a bit away from the picture.
We don't need test results. We don't need the ECT score.
Hey, I saw this weird thing. Here's a picture. I saw this avalanche. Here's a picture. Hey, I got awesome face shots and a good day today. Here's a picture. And all those things give me information, even if you don't realize it.
Extremely valuable.
And so I tell people, you know, anytime you're going out, it should almost be a habit because, you know, it might sound selfish because I'm trying to make my job easier, but my job is to make everybody safer and have more fun.
It's a force multiplier. You know, in the military we talk about force multipliers, and by getting more observations out there, Andy can't be in all these places at once, and so it really helps us draw a much better picture of what's transpiring in the mountains. Yeah,
and then so once you collect all this data, what do you do with it then? How do you get it out to the public in a way that's helpful?
Yeah, so I'll write up kind of in-depth observations myself and kind of summarize what's going on. We've got two main zones, the north zone kind of by the Castner Glacier, and then the south zone over by the summit area where it's a little bit more popular moto. And I'll basically kind of highlight the avalanche problems in that area and highlight the big picture stuff that we're seeing. And so my big mentality is I want to communicate the best I can things that people can't see. So those deep layers, and then also key people in, you know, snow science and backcountry travel is an overload of information. It takes years and years and decades to be an expert on it. And so one thing I like to focus on is being able to hone that in. If I can tell you, you know, it might be your first year backcountry skiing or mountain riding, and I say, hey, look for these 2 or 3 avalanche problems or these 2 or 3 signs, and this is how you can test for it. And then that person, instead of being overwhelmed and then shutting their brain off and then just riding wherever they want anyways, they can say, okay, I need to look for this sign, or I need to, you know, dig in the snow or stick my probe in and feel for this weak layer. Whatever it be, it can be an infinite possibilities. So I do those kind of more in-depth write-ups. Where most people probably get the information is I post about a minute-long video for almost every day I go into the field of just like a quick down and dirty. This is what's going on. These are the avalanche problems. It's a great place to show people in a snow pit, you know, what layers we have are going on, what's happening underneath the snow. And then while people are scrolling on Instagram or Facebook, I just pop up and I bug them with, hey, this is Andy with the Eastern Alaska Range Avalanche Center, and you're stuck listening to me if you want the information.
Well, you got to get them where they're at.
You got to get them where they're at, and it's an effective tool. And the hope is that you see that, you know, you can stay generally informed with the snowpack, because if you're recreating the same place over and over again, it's good to kind of know the history of the place. And then before you go out, when you're trying to make a decision on where to go or if to go, then you dive a little bit deeper and you say, all right, I'm going to pull up that observation. I'm going to pull up these forecasts to kind of see what's going on and where we might go. Or, heck, we're living up here. Is it worth it to drive down to the deltas? You know, that's a big question I get all the time, and totally fair. It's a long drive, and it can be a lot of fun. But if you get down there and everything's just wind blasted and there's no powder left, you know, it might be worth it to go up to ski land for the weekend.
You've talked about forecasts being available and weather trends and terrain choice, and you also talked about how people just kind of, when it's, I just want to get out there. If obviously it would be best for people to pay attention to all that stuff, but if they were just going to check one thing before they were going out? What matters the most in terms of reducing avalanche risk?
Yeah, so I would say reading those forecasts and those observations, that will, it is my job to take all this information, all the weather station information, all the weather tracking, all the other observations, and condense it down into something that you can read on your way to the trailhead in as simple as terms as possible, to where you can understand that. And I'm thinking all over here, I'm tracking all these different layers, but if you're going to check one thing, it's checking that forecast and checking that observation. Hopefully, if I did my job right, you're going to get 90% of the information you need just off that one source. And if you go down to Haines, if you go down to Valdez, Hatcher, or Turnagain, they all have the same system where they're going to have that forecast for the day. A lot of those places are going to change the color rating for the day, and there's a 1 through 5 scale. We don't quite have enough resources up here to quite do that yet, but that's kind of our long-term goal. But if you do go down there, I encourage you, the color should not be the only thing you look at the day. It's the really easy thing to just check out, but at a minimum, reading that forecast and understanding what those avalanche problems are for the day, because that's what's going to most likely turn your good day from a bad day.
Yeah. Well, and do you offer those through the website that we were talking about?
So alaskasnow.org will have all of the AIC centers, but if you're going to remember one website, avalanche.org has a map to everywhere in America that has an avalanche center, and it'll route you to their website. And so it has a map, and you can go and look where you're going. You can see what color the map is if they have a danger rating issued for that day, and you click on that site, and it'll take you to the Hatcher Center, or it'll take you to the Valdez website. So if you're going to remember one website, it's avalanche.org, and that'll kind of route you to wherever you're going, or if you're going down to lower 48 and trying to have a good time, all those centers are linked there as well.
Yeah.
Let me just kind of add to that real quick. The distillation process that Andy is talking about is extremely complex. And this national, even international standard that avalanche.org has sort of evolved over many years, we've adopted that. So we operate in this, like when you see a avalanche hazard from Haines that is moderate average, it's the same as if you were traveling to British Columbia or the French Alps. And so there's this, really great standardization that has transpired. So if you're familiar with other places in Colorado, you can kind of use that knowledge and apply it up here as well.
I was just going to say that, if people that go, as many do, to other states, or in the case of Canada, you're talking about another country. And they're part of it too, did I hear you say?
Yeah, they have a different national center, but we work very closely. Haines actually alternates forecasting for a zone. They switch off, I can't remember how often, but right on the border is a lot of good skiing. And so Jeff, our forecaster down in Haines, basically switches off with the Avalanche Forecast Center. Say, all right, you guys get it for 2 weeks or whatever it is, and then they get it for 2 weeks. So there's a lot of coordination, and they, do slightly different things, but at the end of the day, they're doing the same stuff. They're looking at the same problems, and it's pretty standardized. So across the U.S., A3, the American Avalanche Association, is kind of our governing body that works with the National Avalanche Center, that works with the Avalanche Centers, and A3 does the education, the centers, and kind of la-di-da-di everything. So that's kind of our larger organizations, and the National Avalanche Center is what kind of organizes all the different avalanche centers.
I want to just bring something back, JR. This is an interior podcast.
Yeah.
And one of the really cool things about living in the interior of Alaska is that some of the best skiing and motorized snow machining in the world exists just short drives away. Yeah. So you can be in the Chugach National Forest around Turnagain Pass or Hatcher Pass or Haines or Valdez in all, 1.5 days drive or a full day's drive. And those are places where people have been making these extreme ski movies for 25, 30 years, and they're just, right on our fingertips. And that's one of the amazing things about living here is that if you have the time and you can get away, you can be in some terrain that is absolutely world class.
Yeah, and be out there all by yourself.
That too.
Which brings its own risks. But yeah, I mean, the Warren Miller film crews would come to Cordova a lot, with Points North heli-skiing, which I don't know if it exists anymore. I'd have to look it up. But yeah, all kinds of great places to do that. But obviously you want to do it safely. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Andy, how about, you've got any examples of how this work that you do has made a difference, has maybe prevented accidents in our area, in the eastern area that you work on?
Yeah, so one just the other weekend, actually I was going up the Golcana Glacier at Summit area, kind of assessing that persistent weak layer that I had been talking about. And coming back down to the parking lot, I see tracks that had gone up the College Glacier, which I hadn't been yet this season. And I get back to the parking lot, and I see some people loading up some sleds. I go over to them, hey, we guys up at the College Glacier today? And they're like, yeah, you're the guy from the videos. I'm like, yeah, that's me. And they're like, we found the weak layer you were talking about. We dug down, and we found that weak layer. And yeah, we didn't go much higher than where we were at. And I was like, that's awesome. Thanks for the information. Make sure to submit an observation when you get back. And so that was really cool. Just like day of, I got an observation basically in the parking lot, and it was great to see that they had been using that and informing their terrain decisions to kind of go on. Or last year at Arctic Man, our biggest event, hands down in the Deltas, turns into, I think, the 4th or 5th largest
city in
Alaska. But we had a relatively stable snowpack at the end of last season. And we had this new avalanche problem that was creating pretty small avalanches, very manageable, more just like snow moving off. But over the course of just that weekend, we went from snows just kind of sloughing, moving off, making little powder clouds, no big deal, and it had been continuing to snow and adding on top of that to the point where those avalanches were getting to the spot where they were dangerous and they could keep you and have a pretty bad day. And for me, it's like, all right, we went from this super stable spot and all these people are up here. We've got thousands of people snow machining and skiing around to, hey, I need to communicate and let them know, hey, Sunday might not be the day to keep going. Maybe we party a little bit harder Saturday night and sleep in on Sunday or stay in the flats or stick to the racing and the other events. And so that one was a great opportunity. We had some people down from the Chugach Avalanche Center were up there representing the National Forest. And so putting that kind of word out, and we did see a direct result. I can't tell you if it was because people were hungover. My hope is that they were listening and they were able to kind of come talk to us, and we had that outreach, and we didn't have anybody get caught in an avalanche that Sunday. And it was prime conditions, and we definitely saw a lot of stuff get triggered and some large avalanches happening. And so that was, I was out there that weekend. I was having a lot of fun. Not a really big avalanche problem to be had, and a lot of great outreach talking to the moto community. And then it was like, oh, time to switch the flip the switch and let people know that these are the aspects and elevations they probably shouldn't be recreating on today. Give it a few more days, let it settle out. But this Sunday is not going to be it. And so that was a great opportunity to hopefully save some lives or at least keep people from having a bad day.
Sure. Well, and to get that feedback, to be able to hear out there in the field that people are paying attention makes it worth doing. Because, when you're sitting in a little room, you wonder, is anybody watching this thing? Or is anybody paying attention to these videos? Or
when I'm, in the Black Rapids parking lot trying to get cell service in the Deltas to make sure everything uploads, I was like, I hope someone reads this because I just almost lost my fingers trying to type this out.
Yeah.
Over a bunch of years doing this stuff, I've had interactions at like the bank, and I'm over there doing some personal stuff, and we get to talking with the bank teller and the bank manager, and they go, talking about avalanches and how I do some volunteer work, and they, oh my goodness gracious, I think you saved my son's life.
Oh.
Wow.
I've
gotten feedback like that at the grocery store. Someone will come to an informational seminar and say, I want my kids, they're only 14, but they're going to be in avalanche terrain, and I want them to take this class so that they get the gear, know how to use it. And so that's happened multiple times. And I'm so thankful that that's happened, because sometimes doing volunteer work is hard.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes spending 2 or 3 more hours on the computer in the evening is not really what I want to be doing.
Yeah.
But when you get feedback like that, it makes it all worthwhile.
Good. So, I mean, that is something that it would be. I'm not bashful about encouraging people to do that. I assume there's contact information on your page, to share stories, or if they're catching you on one of the, the Instagram, did you say, or Facebook, wherever you do it.
Facebook.
Yeah. I don't do Instagram. Can you make comments on there? Is that allowed? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Do a comment and because
that's so helpful.
And that kind of gets into, and Hank, maybe this is a good one for you. How can people in the interior support what you're doing at AAIC, Andy, what you're doing at IRAC, and even if they're not hardcore backcountry users, but they still care about it?
Yeah, donate. On our webpage, you can sign up. You can do pick, click, give through the Alaska PFD. But on our website, there's a great link that you can just scan with your phone and make a donation. We also have memberships. Some of the benefits of memberships as we continue to build our community partnerships and our partnerships with local businesses. You can get discounts at a coffee or discounts at staying at the Black Rapids Lodge and other things of that nature, basically. Right now, like I said before, all of the information goes out for free on our website, so you don't need a membership to have access to that.
Mm-hmm. But you can certainly help,
Yes.
to see that it continues.
Yeah.
If there was, how do you think, or if there's one small action that people interacting with this show could take this winter to be more avalanche aware or support avalanche safety in Alaska, what would that be?
I think the biggest one is kind of just understanding avalanche terrain and how it relates to you and your personal risk decisions. What really keeps me up at night is people getting into avalanche terrain or getting into a situation that don't know. They're just completely unaware that they're making a risk decision. Other individuals that are choosing to backcountry ski and choosing to mountain ride that are aware of what they're making a risk decision. They're saying, this is worth it to me. I've, have this amount of training or whatever it is, and I'm choosing to go into that. And so getting that baseline understanding, and it can be completely dependent. If you're never getting out of the road and you're just going to the parking lots, it's just good. Hey, snow's dumping. Avalanches hit the road all the time in Alaska. DOT does great work mitigating it. Maybe give them a little less gripe if you're stuck behind some avalanche mitigation and understand that there is something going on. But having that understanding, and I would say for anybody who's choosing to really not get super in depth, you don't need to go pay for a class. You don't need to do this, that. Our Know Before You Go classes, our next one is on March 11th at Delta Power Sports. Come after work, hang out. You can ask me annoying questions or give me a hard time. You got to listen to me talk for a little bit more. And that's really all you need if you're choosing to not go into avalanche terrain, just to be aware of what that might look like. And if you don't have time for that, Know Before You Go has its own website. And I'm a big fan of YouTube University, especially if it's not something that, skiers and riders, we dedicate our time, money, and some might say it's obsessive to the point. But if you're just the typical interior resident that likes to go cross-country skiing at Birch Hill, or maybe they knit all winter, being generally aware of what that avalanche hazard is and how it might relate to you. And for you, it might just be on the road network. For others, it might be when you're out cross-country skiing or making sure the kids are sledding in a generally safe spot. And so scaling that information and that general knowledge and understanding of when avalanches happen and when they don't. Often you see in the news or avalanche fatality comes out of nowhere and strikes these people. It was completely unexpected. It may have been unexpected to that individual, but there are telltale signs and information that you can get. And avalanches don't come out of this thin blue sky. There are signs to know, but if you don't know, you don't know. So I would say get that baseline of understanding for whatever that means to you, and just be having a little bit more awareness of the avalanche hazard and how it might relate to what you're doing throughout your day or what you're doing for fun.
All right. Well, then let's bring that home again as far as restating where should people go to learn more or stay connected with the work you guys are doing.
Yeah, I would recommend people go to our website, alaskasnow.org, and that provides the links to all the different regional centers. It provides the links to observations if you want to post an observation, and it also links to all of the information that folks like Andy and our professional staff in Valdez and in Haines are posting in real time. So that's the central location for all that type of information.
Good. Well, and I lied because that isn't the final question. You guys have come to Fairbanks from elsewhere, and I really like to get a sense from everybody, whether they've been here their whole life or, whether they're relatively new to being in this area. But, I mean, you've lived other places, and now you're here. What is it, Hank, about Fairbanks that makes it home for you?
Oh, just the trail network of Fairbanks is amazing. I tell people this all the time. If it weren't for the trails, I don't know that I'd still live here. Yeah. And so whether it's summertime and you're running or biking, or wintertime and cross-country skiing, or biking some more, or having these mountains, these amazing, huge mountains, it's just this incredible playground to go and recreate with big glaciers that are rival places like Nepal in their scale. And so, trails in interior Alaska and the proximity to the mountains, it's just an amazing place to live.
Andy, what keeps you here?
The community. Yeah. It's a tight-knit group, especially in the activities I like to do. Once you know one person, you kind of know everybody. Yeah. And, you run into them in the mountains and you're like, I don't recognize that car is like a weird thing for me. Yeah. Like who's coming up from the Matsu Valley, Yeah. And so it's great to just have that network and have people that you just like, you might not know them, but you both have a common friend or a mutual acquaintance or whatever it is. And it's just a very welcoming crowd. And everyone's just stoked that you want to not stay inside and hob it up for the winter. And
sure.
They're stoked to get out with you.
Well, it's a special kind of people that want to be out in this weather, obviously. All right. And then the final question, you have, there's no right answer, but Hank, Pioneer Park or Alaska Land?
I like Pioneer Park. I think it works.
All right. Yeah. How about you?
Pioneer Park.
Okay. That's because you're both recent. But that's, like I said, no wrong answers. No, hey, I enjoy it. Thank you guys for coming in. And it's a busy time of year, obviously, for you. And sharing this information so we could get it out there. And if we can ever be of use to you again, please don't hesitate to let me know.
Definitely. Can I put out the upcoming dates and events that we
have? Oh, sure. Please do.
Yeah. So March 11th, we've got a Know Before You Go at Delta Power Sports. Okay. March 18th at Black Spruce, Iraq Think and Drink, kind of some information and history of how we got to this point. Okay. And then March 23rd is Beacon Practice at UAF at Right Chart. And what day is this going to air?
Probably the 2nd, March 2nd.
All right. If you're listening to this on March 2nd, I'll be at UAF tonight around 6 p.m. at Right Chart Building for some beacon practice. We'll have a few extras if you don't have one for yourself. But any other events, you can check us on Facebook or Instagram or on our website, alaskasnow.org.
Good. Sounds like a plan.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to come and share our organization with the public.
Hey, glad to do it. And if we need to do it again, we'll do it again.
Awesome. Great.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Sorry I didn't know how to do my job and get the whole thing out there intact, but hopefully everybody got something out of that. And we'll actually scroll a little bit of their website for you here as we kind of wrap it up. Again, our guests were Hank Stadowich with the Alaska Avalanche Information Center, Andy Dowdy with the Eastern Alaska Range Avalanche Center, which is the one that covers the interior. It's kind of the subgroup that covers the interior. And This site is what they promised, by the way. It's kind of a one-stop shop, if you will, for information on what's going what's going on in our immediate area and when it's a good time to be careful. And, remembering again that the risk of an avalanche, a quote-unquote avalanche, is not just limited to being out in the mountains. There are ways right in town or not too far out of town where that could end up being a threat. So weird as it was to actually execute, I'm glad that they came in. I'm glad you were able to take that in. Now, it's time for Fab Photo. The photos you send to us so we can share them with everybody and celebrate your amazing abilities. Just go to webcenterfairbanks.com, look for the Fab Photo section. Good chance we'll be able to feature your photo here. And I guess, it wouldn't be a 1 in 12 chance. It's, I don't know, some kind of odds for you to be able to end up in our calendar, which depends on how many people turn things in. So this week, we have Captive, and it was photographed by Norm Berger. Those of you listening, I can't do it justice like the Descriptionator can, so take it away, ma'am.
This photo captures a striking winter night scene in a snowy landscape near Fairbanks. A dramatic cloud formation resembling a tornado or funnel stretches across the dark sky, illuminated from below by warm lights from buildings or street lamps in the distance. Snow-covered trees and bushes line the wide Chena River, with visible snow machine tracks cutting through the fresh powder, evoking the remote beauty of an Arctic winter evening.
Captive by Norm Berger. And I find it slightly amusing that she compares that steam plume to a tornado, which seems like, a tornado would be a little more if it was... Addie M. Remember to send your photos if you would like them to be included in the large cache of Fab Photos to webcenterfairbanks.com. What could be easier? Actually, this could be easier.
It's time for the thing of the day, 'cause every day has things.
On the 2nd of March, we have ourselves a healthy dose of Dr. Seuss Day. We truly love him in a house. We truly love him with a mouse. We truly love him here or there. We truly love him anywhere. We truly love the silly goose. We truly love old Dr. Seuss. Theodore Seuss Geisel, born this day in 1904 in Springfield, Massachusetts, to Theodore Robert and Henrietta Seuss Geisel. And Dr. Seuss Day is a full 24 hours to make a mess with the Cat in the Hat, dance around with Fox and Socks, hear a who with Horton, count the red and blue fish, help the Grinch see the error of his ways, and listen to Sam I Am's friend complain about his dish of green eggs and hams. What a ungrateful hairball. Creative as the good doctor is, though, I can't help but think that making poetry rhyme when you make up words is maybe a little easier to write, like with orange. Everybody says, nothing rhymes with orange. Well, hold my beer, says the doc. The flappity flarp was eating an orange while driving his gas-powered floppity florange. He met up with his wife at the mall called Gazorange, where she bought their very last Croculus Crorange. So here's me hoping my amazing poetry skills make up for my incredible lack of technical skills in executing very unusually show number 18 of Interior Insights, brought to you by the Gas and Diesel Doctor, which I hope will stay with us after this. And because website, webcenterfairbanks.com, email, no, let's do the app first, because it's right down there. The app is Alaska's news source, Fairbanks. The email is jrlewis@ktvf11.com. Oh, I can't wait to see what you have to say about this. Next week, I'm hoping the Jeff Cook program, unless something comes up. I kind of thought we were going to do Jeff Cook last week, but then, with all the snow and the wind, that's why we wanted to talk to the Avalanche guys and get you the show, even with all the that went with it because it's timely, and sometimes you got to do timely. So, I'm J.R. Lewis. This has been Interior Insights, and we hope you have a great week.